Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking with us. It looks like right at the end of the video, Facebook rebelled up against us and threw up a copyright violation. So I apologize if you did miss the very end of it, but it looks like most everyone did get to see the entire thing. Again, my name is Julia. I'm here at the Foss Waterway Seaport. And we are ready for the Q&A now. So we have Carly Vester, the producer of the film, and we have Jonathan here, who is one of the divers that you saw in the film. And then we also have, helping us out today, Chris with Pretty Gritty Tours. You're muted, Chris. Here we go.
Good to be back.
Good to be back
today.
So yeah, apparently the ghosts are after us today, but it seems like we got most of the way through, but we just cut off at the very end there. So, okay, so Chris, you were seeing some of the, okay, so here's some comments for one of you guys to go ahead and answer.
Yeah, so I think I'll take that since I was actually down there. To me, it looked like it was a ladder off of someone's truck. Possibly fell off the van and just went over the side of the bridge. It didn't look like it was part of the actual bridge infrastructure, just because it looked like it was fiberglass and not actually steel. And it didn't look like it was down there as long as some of the other debris down there.
Yeah, I think someone told me that probably went in on the building of the new bridge in 2007 is probably where that came from, I think I had heard. Mm-hmm. So let's see. I saw another question, which was, could you explain a little bit about the name 700 Feet Down? That was one that went by on Facebook earlier.
Yeah, so that name comes from the bridge's towers to the depth of the water. So the wreckage is actually only 200 some feet down, but from the current bridge's towers to the very bottom of the Tacoma Narrows is actually 700 feet down. So we kind of wanted to pay tribute to the height that it fell at and how far down those towers fell.
Awesome, thank you. And here's another question from Autumn Ruth Holmes. How long were you down under for? Which I believe is a diving question there.
John question.
Yeah, so we had multiple dive teams. Some of them did shallow dives, but for the majority of the footage that was shown, that was on the deeper sections. And so we had about approximately 30 to 35 minutes on the bottom, and then the entire dive itself was on the range of between 60 and 90 minutes.
Awesome, and I saw that you guys were using rebreathers, which is cool. So that's nice that you had the no bubbles. And then you also mentioned in the video you were carrying some extra gases with you. What were those?
So basically with a rebreather, you have to expect that it can die at any moment because it's basically run on computers. You have cells inside that tell you what the percentage of oxygen that you're breathing is. And if those were to go out, you're basically flying this thing blind. So you always have to take enough regular scuba gas with you to get out of a dive if it were to break.
Awesome. Chris, do you have a question? I'll give you a chance. Otherwise,
yeah, thanks. What kind of prep did you guys do before attempting this one?
Is that for the diving or?
Well, let's scattershot that one right now. I'm curious what kind of diving you guys did in the area in preparation for this particular one, and then sort of what research led into the concept of starting the documentary.
I'll let Peter go ahead and start that one, and then I can speak to ours.
Sure. Welcome back.
Thank you. You know, I've been diving in the Puget Sound for 30 years, and I'd always been fascinated with the Galloping Gertie wreck. So that started the concept of the movie, but it led into the idea of mistakes that were made in the past and how that correlates that to the mistakes that are made today, and how we can learn from the past and hopefully fix the mistakes we're currently making.
Fantastic.
And then from my point of view, we were approached by Peter once this was well underway. They had gotten some footage of some of the shallower sections, and they really wanted to get some of the deeper sections. And so knowing how difficult this site was, we actually went out and did probably 5 to 6 test dives in various other locations around the Puget Sound. Some were in Lake Washington, some were in Elliott Bay itself, just some of the more well-known sites. And we would just go on deeper sections with some of our equipment just to make sure, A, that it all worked, B, that we had the proper lighting set up and how far above the lighting guy had to be from the camera guy to not have the kickback of the light from all the detritus that's in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And then just the communication, because again, I kind of hinted on that in the film. It's really hard to coordinate. You have no vocal ability to talk. And because I'm hovering above him, I can't really see what he's looking at. So I just kind of have to point blindly in front of him and hope that it's highlighting what he's looking at.
Well, your intuition was spot on.
Awesome. And do you see this question again from Autumn Ruth Holmes? Thank you for your participation. Coming in from YouTube. This is streaming to several different places. The Fossil Waterbury Seaport Facebook, the Pretty Gritty Facebook, and then also onto YouTube. So her question there is, how did you find the gentleman that was on the bridge when it collapsed? And did you ask locals to find the man that had skipped school to watch? Just another question about the research and how you found all these great people to interview.
Yeah, that finding folks who had firsthand stories was certainly a challenge when producing this film. And it's kind of funny. Once we found the first person through a local connection, it snowballed as word of mouth from there. So the gentleman who skipped school to watch the collapse, Swede, actually was at an assisted living home that Virginia was at. And so it all kind of connected, and we've had a few folks reach out to us who had those firsthand stories and wanted to share them. And for me, that's been one of the coolest parts of putting this film together, is being welcomed into the homes, whether that's by family members or the folks who are sharing those stories firsthand, oftentimes both coordinating it to get me in there, and then just sitting and chatting in their living room for an hour or so and hearing stories about the bridge, but also stories about Tacoma's history and Gig Harbor's history, and circling all of that around. So really word of mouth.
Awesome. And here is a question from CraignMartha Miller. Are you aware of other roads or bridges in the area that have the stripes indented? That's an interesting one. Anybody?
I know driving around in the area, I've seen it, but I can't tell you what specific road it is. But I know I've seen them in and around the area. So that was actually surprising to see on the actual wreckage below, was that there was indented like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now, a question just came in, and it's one that I was going to ask too. Everyone wants to know what happened to the car and the dog. So from Pat, we have here, leading right into that, were there any cars found in the bridge remains?
Not by us. I think that the cars were just, they had so much surface area and they're so much lighter than the rest of the bridge that, and remember, it's been 80 years now. So I figured while it was going down, the current was probably pushing the cars well downstream or upstream, whichever way the current happened to be going at that time. And over the course of 40 years, the salt water has just eroded it all.
Yeah, one of the divers who was with us on our first dive under the bridge, a gentleman named Ed, had actually dove the Model A that had fallen from the bridge, and that was north on the Gig Harbor side, about 500 or 600 yards north of where the bridge wreckage is. So quite a ways over to just go get a picture of an old Model A, and that was 30 years ago when he found that car. So it's probably pretty. There's not a lot of it left, would be my thought.
And I think it's worth noting, too, that it was actually predicted on this day 80 years ago that the bridge was going to collapse, or at least it wasn't safe to drive over. So they had shut down the bridge on either side, and there was just that one car that was left on there, I believe, from the inspector. But it's up there with the most common question asked is, what happened to the car? What happened to the dog? And is there a giant octopus under the bridge?
Chris, do you want to take this next one?
Yeah, as pole vaulting right off the octopus question, how are the pieces affecting the ecosystem down there?
Peter, do you want to take that?
I'll start it off, and why don't you go from there? I mean, what's interesting, what we've heard from actually our boat captain, who we had interviewed separately, is when the new bridge was built, it destroyed most of the habitat of what Galloping Gertie had created. And he had said there were large octopus dens, really large wolf heel holes, and all of that has been kind of crushed down to smaller pieces now when they put in the third bridge. But John, go ahead from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually spot on, because if you look at any of the dive sites that are north or south of the Tacoma Bridge, there's tons of rock piles where all of the octopus live, and there's tons of fish. But I think now that it's been 80 years, a lot of that substrate that's down on the bottom has actually created an artificial reef, and you start to see that life come back. It's not as rich as some of the untouched areas, but you're starting to see large schools of rockfish, which is actually a really good sign, because rockfish tend not to move from where they're born. And so you can tell how healthy a reef system is by how many rockfish are in that area.
Awesome.
And what's also fabulous, if you're not a incredibly skilled diver as these guys are, and you want to try diving the shallow sides of the bridge, you've got a live boat and you have the necessary safety measures in place. The sides of the bridge are a beautiful kelp forest with dozens of different species of marine life and all sorts of seals and sea lions and octopus and wolf eels and fish. So if you're willing to just dive 30 to 80 feet and not really encounter the old wreckage, you can see wonderful ecological systems on either shallow side of the bridge. Just be careful of currents.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I know that you guys discussed the currents and the diving a little bit in the video. Do you want to speak to that a little bit more about the diving and the current situation? With everyone knows the Narrows is an interesting place to be. Oh, wait, here's a question.
Here it is.
Real one. When they rebuilt the bridge, what did they do with what was still standing? So technically, they rebuilt the bridge once, and then they built a second bridge, right? So there's actually two answers to that question. Who'd like to take that?
Carly?
Sure. A lot of the debris from the 1940 bridge was, I believe, cleared. The underwater stuff was cleared for the 1950 bridge to be built. From what I've heard, some of the wreckage that was dangling down that you see in those clips actually hung there for a few months afterwards. The gentleman who saw the collapse from Salmon Beach said that it was just hanging there over the waterway for months afterwards. So I think a lot of it was, a lot of that steel that was hanging there was cleaned up and then scrapped from there, but that is not a story I have explored in depth.
And they used a lot of that steel actually in the war effort to repurpose for guns and tanks and everything else in the war effort after 1940.
I got a good one right here. As far as the wind, was that typical for the area? I mean, we know that they were able to predict that this was going to happen pretty much that day. Did they know that this was going to be something they'd have to deal with in the days after the bridge was completed?
I think that depends on who you asked. You know, there were a lot of people who thought the bridge was not going to fall. How could it fall? Bridges don't fall. But there were a fair number of people who knew. They knew that the bridge was moving. They knew that this was going to be an issue and they needed to stabilize it. The winds are common today as they were back then. And I think it was blowing 40, 45 that day that it fell down. And really what caused the collapse of the bridge was the wind not being able to move through the bridge. The aerodynamics of the bridge with just a solid steel plate girder truss underneath kept it from being able to move as a suspension bridge should. So yeah, those winds are common today. We just have better integrity for our bridges. We've learned from our mistakes.
I think Paula has a great new business concept, underwater tours of the wreck.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That's for your next documentary.
Yeah. No, unfortunately, they don't have underwater tours. You're going to have to learn to dive and spend a few hundred hours getting advanced rebreather certifications and get down there and see the wreck for yourself.
At least for the deep sections, there are, as Peter said, there are some things to see in the shallower sections. There's some pieces of some pretty big concrete and stuff. You just won't see a lot of that steel and roadway.
Awesome. So I think we have a lot of people that were really commenting while this was going, how interesting this is, and how I think we all have really learned a lot, and we really appreciate having all you guys here and being able to debut the documentary. Again, we apologize if you were watching and the end of it got cut off there, but you can go and see it in person. Carly, do you want to talk about that? And then we have one more question that came in.
Yeah, so we're very excited to be sharing it through the end of November at a couple of local museums. The Harbor History Museum, who licensed some of the historical footage to us, will be showing it in their main gallery area through the end of November, and the Tacoma Historical Society will also be showing it through the end of November. If you can't make it there in person, we are working on some other ways to see it as well, including film festivals in 2021 and a couple other local screenings here and there. We really wanted to commemorate the 80 years today, and we're very excited to share it with Foss Waterway. So stay tuned to hear of other outlets to watch it in, and we should have a longer documentary coming out next year as well, where we're expanding on it and including some of those stories like, where's the car? What about the octopus? We'll have more info on that soon.
Awesome. Does someone want to take this last question? And again, so if you did miss the end, you're just going to have to go see it in person at one of those places or wait for the longer documentary. That was an accidental teaser. And again,
Well played.
We do apologize for that. Yeah, Facebook.
John, you want to answer the temperature question?
Oh, so the temperature question, yeah, so the salt water around here is pretty homogenized, unlike lakes where you have thermoclines as you go deeper and deeper. And so once you get past the first 30 feet, it's pretty much going to be the same from 30 to 200 feet. So between 39 and 45 degrees, depending on the time of year.
Awesome. Perfect. So I just want to say thank you so much to all of our guests for coming. And there's a few museums that have chimed in the comments there about getting some things in person with us as well, being able to display it on our screens. I know that at the moment there's a lot of places that are really missing our visitors. And I just want to let you know about our hours, which are Fridays 3 to 7, Saturdays 10 to 2, and Sunday 12 to 4 right now here at the Foss Waterway Seaport. And we also just announced that all students are able to access the museum for free for the rest of the school year, and 50% off to teachers. So yeah, we're really excited about that. That announcement just went out yesterday. So if you are a student, come on down, learn some more about our local history. And thank you so much to everyone for being here today. And stay tuned for more information about where you can catch this documentary again next time. And happy anniversary. Have a good one, guys.
Thanks so much, Julia. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.